The female reproduction is more complex, has more stages, goes through a cycle. Also, of course, pregnancy only occurs in females. So most of what we're going to do is going to be focused on female reproduction. Mammals go through a pattern called estrus. Okay, and there's 4 parts to it: proestrus, estrus, metaestrus, and diestrus. Anestrus occurs in mammals that have a breeding season, and then the non-breeding season there in anestrus. So estrus is not cycling during that point. So an meaning not, so they're not in estrus. But the 4 stages then are these 4. And this is a stage of non-estrus. Okay? There are lots of hormones involved in regulating the 4 different stages, but we're going to focus on these 4. Progesterone, estradiol, follicle-stimulating hormone, which we'll abbreviate FSH, and luteinizing hormone, which we will abbreviate as LH. Okay? And FSH and LH are also the hormones responsible for maturing sperm. So the same hormones just have different effects because of the different tissues. Okay, so to understand what's going on, you first have to understand some of the anatomy. The ovary is the female gonad. The gonad is the general term for where the gametes are made. Okay, so this is our female gonad. And the oocytes, which are what will become eggs, they aren't quite yet eggs because they haven't completed meiosis. But the oocytes will all form from stem cells called oogonia. And these actually divide in utero. So a female is born, and it happens early in development with the development of the ovary. And then when a female is born, all of the eggs or all the oocytes that female will have are there, and it's fixed. So it doesn't continue afterwards. You just have this big bank of oocytes that you pull from through the different estrus cycles. Okay, but then they develop into oocytes. And they are surrounded by follicle cells. Okay? And so then a follicle is the cells which are housing the oocytes and the oocytes combined. So it starts out where you have all these very, very small follicles called primordial follicles. And through every estrus cycle, they will develop, a few of them will develop and become bigger. And one of them will become bigger than the rest, become the primary follicle. And then the rest will just regress and go through apoptosis. The primary follicle will get bigger and become a secondary follicle. and then it will mature to become a fluid-filled antral follicle or Graafian follicle. And here it will have a bunch of cells and then the oocyte sitting on this stalk of cells. And surrounding it. All right, and then at ovulation, the oocyte is released from the ovary. And then goes into the uterine tubes or the fallopian tubes. But this structure that remained behind, that formed the antral follicle, then forms what's called the corpus luteum. And it then becomes a glandular structure that secretes progesterone. And progesterone is important for maintaining the conditions for pregnancy. Okay, any questions? Who's taken anatomy and physiology before? No one? Okay. Yeah, Rachel has. So this is what your parents talk about, birds and the bees? Really?
Yes.
Awesome. I did not go into this much detail with my son. So. All right. So that's the ovary. At this point, pregnancy or fertilization can occur, and pregnancy would occur later. If pregnancy doesn't occur, or after pregnancy, this corpus luteum then just regresses into a scar, a placental scar, and it's called a corpus albicans. And in some species, those corpora albicantia, that's plural, stay in the ovary. And you can slice up the ovary and count the number of corpora albicantia.
What about in people?
I'm not sure. I think they are retained in people though. So what would that tell you then? The number of corpora albicans. Okay, yeah. So it could correlate with age. If you knew how long an estrus cycle was and how many times they were pregnant. But then at a certain age, you run out of oocytes and then go through senescence, or in humans it's called menopause, and then you no longer produce corpora albicantia. So it's only going to actually tell you the age within this window of sexual maturity. Okay, so that's the ovary. The female reproductive tract actually has a lot of diversity. This is going to be the human one, but they can, again, be very different in their shape in the uterus. Sometimes there are two uteruses that are separated from each other.
How would they do, like, animals that have litters, right? So, like, dogs and cats, or it's multiple.
Yeah, so it would be, they're called bicornate, so it's like two horns, and within those horns you can have multiple pregnancies within that uterus.
So do they release multiple oocytes to be fertilized?
Yes. Yeah, because all those oocytes, all the individuals in that litter have different genetics. They aren't twins. They are all from a different egg.
Can they have different
sperm.
fathers? Like,
Oh, they
you
could.
have, like, radically different
In one litter?
Yeah.
You could. If they mated multiple times and was fertilized at different times. And there is, there is sperm competition does occur in some species where a woman will mate multiple times, but the male with the most sperm that can flush out other sperm would fertilize the egg. Yeah, good questions. But yeah, so a human has a simplex uterus where it doesn't have, it's just one big area where the baby can develop, so there's no separations. All right, so at the posterior end, though, you have the vagina, which becomes the birth canal. And then the uterus is marked by a circular muscle. This is a sphincter muscle, this is a circular muscle called the cervix. Which is the opening to the uterus. Okay, and there are a couple layers that are very important to the uterus. There's actually 3 layers, but we'll just talk about 2. The first layer is called the myometrium. Myo means muscle. So this is the muscular layer. Why would you need muscles in your uterus or female? Yeah, exactly. So push out the baby. And then you have a layer that has a very accessible blood supply. This is the endometrium. So this is where implantation occurs, and then the placenta forms. And there's a large network of blood vessels that develops. Okay. Okay, we then have the uterine tubes, or the fallopian tubes. And this cup-like structure at the end is called the infundibulum. And it has little fimbriae, these little kind of fingers, which help coax the egg into the uterine tubes after it's released from the ovary. So this is the ovary here. Okay. Again, there's lots of diversity, and if you look in the book, there's some pictures. In monotremes, the vagina actually forks. So it has a central vagina and then 2 peripheral vaginal parts, and they like meet again at the top. The middle one becomes the birth canal. And then there's lots of different shapes for the uterus as well. But yeah, so basically what creates the diversity is how septated it is. Okay, so how separate the right and left part of the uterus becomes. And ultimately they can become completely separate, where you would have two separate cervices, a cervix for each one.
And that one's things that have multiple litters.
Well, they don't necessarily have to be fully separate to do that, so they can just be like this, bicornate.
So, but the separation is what helps with.
Yeah, so you can have a baby here, one here, one here, one here, like that, yeah. Okay, so that's the female reproductive tract and the ovary. Are then what's going through changes during this estrus. So proestrus, this is the first stage. And during this, we have follicle stimulating hormone, which is at a low but constant level. Luteinizing hormone as well is low. Estrogen is increasing, and progesterone is low as well. And so what's happening is follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone are developing the follicles, so helping them advance from primary to secondary, secondary to antral. And the one of them is then at the end of proestrus is going to be at this antral follicle stage, so it's fully mature, filled with fluid, ready to rupture. Okay. As well, the increasing estrogen is developing the endometrium. Okay, so tissue is growing, the blood supply is increasing. It's becoming more and more vascular throughout proestrus. Okay, so essentially, you're preparing for ovulation, which occurs during estrus. So estrus is also sometimes called going into heat. So the female is sexually receptive during estrus. And often the male can detect that and also would be sexually active during that time. So what happens during estrus is follicle stimulating hormone spikes. And so does luteinizing hormone. Okay, and then this causes the rupture of the antral follicle or ovulation. And at this point, estrogen is also at its maximum. And progesterone is also then low, but it's starting to increase. Okay. In metaestrus, this is essentially the holding pattern. All right, we're just gonna wait and see if fertilization took place and if implantation takes place. So follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone return to their low levels. Okay, so they are just going to they're continually developing more follicles. So it's the amount of time it takes for a primordial follicle to become an antral follicle, so to fully develop, is much longer than one estrus cycle. So they're constantly being developed. It's not on the same cycle. So, and I think in humans it's something like 140 days from primordial to antral follicle. So in metaestrus, though, estrogen is now going to decrease. And progesterone is going to now increase. Okay, so estrogen really acts like the preparatory hormone. What are we going to do to get ready for pregnancy? And progesterone then is the hormone that takes over once pregnancy occurs. Okay? And if implantation occurs, then progesterone will continually increase. Okay, so and then you cycle out of estrus and into pregnancy. Okay. But if pregnancy doesn't occur, then you go into reset mode, which is diestrus, okay? So follicle stimulating hormone remain low, luteinizing hormone remains low, estrogen is low, progesterone is low. So everything is low. And what happens then is the endometrial lining is absorbed. And the vasculature then reduces so that you don't have as much capillaries going into the endometrium. Or is shed, and this occurs in primates. And that's called menses, or menstruation.
Both, if it's absorbed or if it's shed, it's still called the same thing.
No, only if it's shed, it's called menses. It goes through menstruation. So most mammals don't go through menstruation, just primates. Bummer, huh? And then from diestrus, you'll go back into proestrus to reset and release and prepare for ovulation. Okay, any questions? Is just a non-estrus state. For monoestrus species. You?
So like if you're not continuously.
Yeah. So if they have a breeding season, like horses, they only breed in the fall, I believe. And they'll go through proestrus, estrus, and not get pregnant. Metaestrus, but
Go
then
through it once.
yeah, they'll only go through it once, and then they'll go into anestrus until the next year. Multiple would be polyestrus. And generally, you either have a breeding season, your monoestrus, or your polyestrus, which just means you continually go from one cycle to the next.
Go through this whole process over and over again.
Right.
So then there's no anestrus. in
Right.
polyestrus.
No anestrus.
I kind of have a question.
Yes.